drivers.
Yeah.
um. All right. So I don't know if I said the name of the book I was talking about last week. It's Let me see if I can get this in the webcam. It's called Deep Nutrition by Kate Shanahan. I just wanted to make sure that people knew that, so that way they could look it up. Because I know that I said it was by Kate Shanahan, but I didn't remember the title, so I probably didn't use that. So, but yeah, actually, she was at the Boulder Ancestral Health Symposium in
Oh, cool.
2016. She was
Hmm.
there, and they live in Denver. She and her husband. So, but actually, it was interesting though because like her book is basically about like epigenetics. And at one of the talks, it was about retrognathia or retrognathia or something like that. I don't know how
Hmm.
people say it. Um, which is a really fascinating topic that we can talk about some other time. Um, and she was just like grilling the speaker after the talk about like because she was trying to find like some genetic explanation for what he was discussing in the talk, which is basically about like mothers being hypoxic and then their children. His theory was basically that mothers are hypoxic while they're pregnant, and then their children kind of adapt to this hypoxic environment, and so they have like a smaller airway. And so she was trying to find like some genetic explanation for this. Like she was just like really like hell bent on it. I just thought that was really kind of interesting considering that she wrote a book about like epigenetics and how like diet and the environment influence um basically how children are born and
Hmm.
also throughout your life.
Uh, yeah. Well, maybe I guess I can't really comment because I wasn't there, but maybe she was trying to figure out like what genes are turned
Oh
off
yeah.
or
Uh-huh.
on
Yeah.
from the supposed, hypoxia.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't know, I think most of the time that's kind of irrelevant. It's like, yeah, you can like go and look at this study, but if you know like the end result, like this happens and then
Hmm.
um you get this result, like do you really need to know what exact gene does that? I don't think it changes anything. It might change it for like your research angle because then you can like go and like look at exactly what that enzyme is once you have like a
Hmm.
mechanism of action. Like I've done this sometimes where I try to like come at things from like a different direction. Like I'll like read something with kind of like a mainstream hypothesis and then like kind of using my peat knowledge, I will come at it from like a different angle because I can like see like what kind of enzymes
Hmm.
are are working there. But I don't
Yeah.
know. So I felt like last episode we didn't really talk about coffee very much, even though that was supposed to be the topic.
We talked a
Um,
little bit about coffee.
yeah, we did. Um, but oh, how do you like your coffee?
Hmm. I drink a lot of iced coffee,
Oh, really?
and it just cold. Like if I make coffee, usually I make it like the night before. Um, I'll just put it in a French press, like pre-ground
Oh,
coffee beans, dump hot water into it, and then just put that whole thing in the fridge maybe.
hmm.
And then either later that night or in the morning, I'll take it out, dump it into, I bring a thermos to work and I'll put the coffee in there, put sugar in there and milk. And if I go to a place, I like to get I like lattes. And when it's hot, iced lattes. When it's cold, hot lattes.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, no, I don't like cold coffee. I
Mm.
I like it. nice and hot and warm. I don't like it like burn your tongue hot, like how every like Starbucks and
Hmm.
wherever else they always serve it like that. In fact, actually, like every cup of coffee I've ever had from Starbucks tasted terrible. Um, like
Hmm.
I don't know what they do. I was talking to this Australian guy, um, in Europe this summer, and he was saying that yeah, he's kind of like a coffee aficionado, and he said he hates Starbucks. He says they burn the beans, and I think that kind of explains it because it always tastes like really bitter. So I just have to get like a blonde roast. That's what I do.
Yeah, I don't almost ever get regular coffee from Starbucks because yeah, it's no better than like McDonald's regular coffee. It's
Yeah.
just more expensive, but I will get espresso drinks like lattes from there. I think that they do those like well.
Oh yeah. I found this really interesting when I was in Russia and Lithuania for sure. When I would go to the coffee shops there, the amount of coffee that they would serve me, even if I ordered an Americano, is still like maybe a quarter in volume of the amount that I would get if I just ordered like the smallest available size at like Starbucks or any kind of like coffee shop.
Hmm.
And that was just a lot more enjoyable for me, especially like to have like alongside a meal because then you don't have like all this volume of like water coming in with the meal.
Yeah, was it more concentrated?
Yeah, I mean like it was definitely more espresso like, but even if I ordered an Americano, like there was like, maybe six, or probably like 8 ounces. Like even a large Americano would be like 8 ounces,
Hmm.
whereas that's like where the Starbucks sizes start.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just really preferred that, and I was kind of upset about it. So basically, I I hate Starbucks because I think they ruined American coffee culture. That's the conclusion I've come to.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting.
But
I have never been impressed with American coffee culture. I mean, I didn't really drink it as a kid, and like my parents, I just watched them make drip coffee when I was a kid, and I didn't know anybody that really gave a shit about coffee.
yeah,
Um,
I mean
so,
the only people in my life that ever drank coffee were my grandparents. My parents never drank coffee.
hmm.
They had like a coffee machine, but that was just for whenever my grandparents would come and then they would make coffee. Um, but yeah, I actually only got into coffee because of Bulletproof, Dave Asprey and stuff like that. That's where
uh,
my coffee journey begins. Um, and yeah, we talked about that on the last episode, and we can talk some more about that just because like I was very immersed in his world, from the very beginning. I was there basically at the beginning. Like I I was introduced to him on an interview with Peter Schiff, actually. You know Peter Schiff?
with a T at the end of it?
Yes.
No.
No?
I mean,
Oh.
I've heard the name,
He's
but
he's
I
he's
don't.
he's pretty popular in like libertarian circles.
So wait, there's a Peter Schiff without a T.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. I haven't followed him in such a long
Is
time,
is
but
does he have an investment company that he sells
yes.
gold and
Yeah, it's
stuff?
like Euro something
No
or
T.
whatever.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
yeah, I know
Yes.
him.
That's the guy. He had Dave Asprey on and he was talking about how like
No kidding.
he improved his IQ, and that just I was like I want to check this out. And so that's where it all started for me.
Oh man, that's okay. I think it's great. I
I mean,
started drinking coffee because, well, I started, okay, so I started drinking coffee practically speaking because I did a lot of studying in the first year of grad school at a Barnes and Noble Starbucks cafe, and I just got into the habit of buying coffee drinks because I was there. And then I intellectually accepted that coffee was a good thing to drink pretty simultaneously with that time in my life from repeat,
Yeah.
stuff.
Um, but how I drink coffee now, I just have like it's like a pour over, where you just have like kind of like a ceramic pot, and then there's like a filter over the top of that ceramic pot, and that filter it's in the shape of like a cone, and I have a metal filter, um, because then it allows like all like the oils and stuff to pass through. With the paper filter, the oils would be caught, by the paper filter.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I put the grounds in the cone shaped filter, and then you just pour hot water over it into the pot. So I mean, like if you really wanted to like do this like on a budget, basically all you need to do is just buy the filter for like I don't know, I can't remember, probably like $10 or something like that, and you could just hold that over like whatever cup or container that your coffee is going to go into,
Hmm.
and then boom, you can make coffee. Or you can do it, um, the Ottoman way, or the Russians call it like the Turkish way, and this is how we would make coffee in camp: is you just put the grounds like in the cup,
Hmm.
and then you just pour hot water in there, and then you just drink it. You just kind of like leave the grounds on the bottom.
Yeah.
That's even more low cost and minimalist.
Yeah. I don't really tend to care uh, too much. I get a little like overwhelmed when people talk about their setups and people are like,
Oh
oh,
yeah,
well,
yeah,
the best way
ridiculous
is,
amounts. And
yeah.
they got like all their like fancy grinders and like several $100 machines and whatnot. And they also tell me that I need to like only eat like one. I only have like once you've had like the bag open for like a week or whatever, then the beans aren't fresh,
Hmm.
and it's like a pound of coffee beans, and I don't know like anybody that like drinks that much coffee, and it's like 15 $10 a bag. So like yeah, I just think people like can really spend a lot of money on this.
Yeah. It's just one of those things that
Yeah.
is acceptable uh, in today's time to
Yes. Yeah.
be into, and to like it's fetishized the equipment and stuff.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it reminds me of like that scene in Pulp Fiction when John Travolta shoots up the heroin. I don't know if you've watched that, but
I
like,
actually haven't. I'm a terrible American.
oh my God. Yeah, but just in general, like hard drug using people
Yeah.
um, uh, tend to have a deep relationship with the paraphernalia that they
Okay.
prepare their drugs with.
Yeah.
And so I think since coffee, caffeine is a drug, I think that it's like an acceptable, it's a similar behavior.
Yeah. I mean, there is like a certain amount of joy that comes to like having like a routine or like a ritual around things.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think people, yeah, that's what people like. And yeah, I think it's kind of interesting, like how you said, like it's an acceptable, like socially acceptable one. Like people won't think you're weird, but you
Hmm.
know, like a lot of other routines or rituals that I have are unusual, and yeah, so um but yeah. I don't know. Speaking on that, I did have something else to say, but I can't remember what it was. So we can move
On
on.
coffee.
Yeah. Oh, another low budget hack I have is they have like these like coffee grinders, because you want to grind up the bean, like have like the whole beans and then grind it up
Hmm.
as you have coffee. Um, and so you can get like these like more expensive like burr grinders. Um, or you can just get like a $10 like Mr. Coffee grinder or whatever, and they call it like a whirly bird. Um, grinder where it's just like this blade on the bottom of the thing. And so the problem with that is that um, it will the size of like the coffee grounds is not very uniform. Like you'll get some that are quite fine, and then others where it's like literally like half a bean. And then like you can like run that like for like 5 minutes straight, and it won't change anything. Like you'll get the same result. Um, but I actually found um, through my own laziness that, which is how I discover many things, that like if you just like leave the grounds in there and don't like clean it every time you use it, um, the grounds will like be on like the outside of the container that like the blade is in, like kind of like it's just a small blender. Um, so the grounds will be on the outside of that, and so then it will funnel everything like into the blade.
Oh,
They won't like get like stuck elsewhere or like be like bouncing around because it might just like nick like the side of like the blade and then just get like tossed somewhere.
yeah.
But yeah, for whatever reason, just basically not cleaning the coffee grinder every time you use it allows you to have a more uniform sized coffee grounds.
All right.
And again, like this is just kind of like, yeah, just like, doing better with less kind of thing. I'm enjoying my moderately fresh coffee that, I over the course of two or three weeks or however long it takes me to go through a bag. And yeah, and then I have it in my grinder, and some of those grounds are probably a few days old, and that's really bad. But yeah, just doing better with less. Um, all right, so we can, yeah, well that was a lot of my coffee stuff. I can talk about some of the other like culinary experiments I've been doing. I've been really focusing on the digestibility of foods.
Mhm.
Um, and like one like, easy way you can do this is to like make your own beans instead of just like buying like canned beans, which is what I would do before. So you just get like dried beans, you soak them for 8 hours, and the secret is to add a some some baking soda. It's about like a teaspoon of baking soda per cup of beans, and you just soak that, and it actually like you don't get any gas. Um, and then well, you want to obviously still cook them afterwards.
Mhm.
And yeah, I've liked that. It's even cheaper. Beans are even cheaper if you just buy them dry. Um,
Yeah, I remember that from my vegetarian days. The
yeah,
beans were cheap.
yeah. Again, with like doing more with less, like my diet has basically become like a bowl of rice with like a few ounces of meat. That's what a lot of my meals are.
Mm.
Because I'm still getting like all the you know good protein and all the good stuff from the meat, and I'm getting the carbs and calories from the starch. I would like to do more potatoes, but it's just so much easier to just throw rice and salt and water into a rice cooker and then just have it cook.
Yeah.
Pota- I mean, potatoes are pretty simple too, but it just is a lot easier.
Hmm.
But yeah, and then also I will freeze things because when you freeze things, it breaks the cell wall. This is like sometimes like when you put like leftovers in the fridge,
Hmm.
like it'll taste better because everything has been broken up because like when it's like when you water expands in volume when it's
Hmm.
frozen, so it's busting up the cell wall. And so when that happens, then it allows like the flavors and everything to kind of like marinate and come together a lot easier. And so I've been experimenting with that. Like I wouldn't even like make anything yet. I will just take those beans, I will cook them, and then put them in the freezer before having them again when I like reheat them for a meal. And then another late. I'm almost done. Another laziness hack is, or yeah, another hack that I found through laziness is rice. You can like double cook it because one night I was like cooking some rice and then I completely forgot it because I was out in the garage doing something. And then
Mhm.
I came back in. I was like, oh, I've been cooking rice and I didn't even realize this was here. And I'm also not really hungry for rice right now. So I just left it in the rice cooker. And then in the morning, I just put some more water in and
Uh-huh.
then just cooked it again. And
Did
it
it make it
tasted
mushy?
it was a little bit more mushy, but it tasted better. Like I was actually amazed. Like it really did taste better.
Have you ever made rice crackers or fried rice after you cooked it or anything like that?
No, I have not been that experimental.
Yeah, there was a. Do you know that brand of rice cracker? It's in normal stores. I think it's called Kami,
No.
Kame. It's like a, Japanese
Oh.
word. And I think they have regular, just salted, it's like they're circles. They're like wafers, and they're just white rice. And I think they have a wasabi flavor where there's some kind of powdered flavor that tastes like wasabi. And they had a red chili powder flavor that I used to buy, I forget where, and I haven't been able to find it. I mean, this is years ago.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that I was just like, you know what? Because I looked up online just recipes like you cook rice. I guess you dry it and then you put it between two flat things like a cutting board or something, and
Oh, yeah, to create
like
the
saran
cookie,
wrap.
like the kind of cookie shape.
Yeah, well, yeah, just make like one, like spread it out on plastic wrap on a flat surface, and then put another piece of plastic wrap and smush it down to the thickness that you want it to be, and then bake that. And I guess that's it. But you have to overcook the rice, so that it's like mushy.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I guess you can either put the seasoning that you want in before or shake it on after the baking process. Uh, and I've never done it. But it's one of those things that's like on your most distant of mental lists.
Yeah.
Like if God
The-
came down and was like, you have infinite time, you would get to it, but
yeah.
almost in no other circumstance will you ever get to this thing.
Yeah. 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 It's like that thing where you're like, yeah, just like years go by and you realize that I haven't done that.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, by that point, you don't even care anymore. You're just like, that's not even important to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, talking about, um, like making things taste better. I noticed that, um, when I moved in with my roommate, I didn't have the sugar that I would normally use, which is like the organic cane sugar from Costco, the
Mhm.
Kirkland brand. Um, and so I was using his, which was like a very refined sugar. And I noticed that I needed more sugar to get like the same kind of taste, the same kind of flavor that I was used to having in my coffee. Um, because the sugar that I normally use is actually less refined. It's not like pure white. Like it's kind of like a tan color. It's not brown sugar, but
Mhm.
it clearly has like some minerals on it. And I thought that was really interesting. I think like having the extra minerals actually gives more flavor. And
Yeah,
on
I've never used that.
and on the kind of like the flip side of that, like there have been like I do eat a lot of sugar, and people that like see me prepare coffee will be shocked. Um, but there and even then, like there have been times where I've actually been sick of sugar. And I think, this is an important point because people will think like you're just gonna eat sugar endlessly, like you can never have enough. But there
Mhm.
is a point, like your body, the reason why your body likes that is because it's decided it's a good thing for you. Um, and so this is just kind of like coming out the other end. of that. Like I have experienced times in my life where like I don't want any sugar. It actually like I'm actually kind of like nauseated by it.
Hmm.
And what could be happening there is like maybe I need like more minerals in the sugar or just like in my diet, period. That's
Hmm.
what my body actually wants. It's like, no, we don't need all this energy right now. What we need is something else.
Yeah, I actually don't have that much of a sweet tooth, naturally. So
You
for
know,
me, it's, I'm pretty
yeah.
neutral.
I mean, I started using the amounts of sugar that I do now as a kind of experiment when I was sick last year. Because that was like something that Ray Peat and Adam Bergstrom both suggested.
Hmm.
And so I was like, okay, I'll try it. And it worked. Like I felt great. I was like sick and I just had like coffee with like 2 or 3 tablespoons of sugar and like I felt great afterwards. And so I've just basically been using as much sugar as I want since then. The only problem is like I think you really need to like be on top of like your dental care. Like I brush after, like every meal and stuff like that. I have, different things that I do just because, yeah, I think that that can be a problem. Not because the sugar is bad for your teeth, but because the bacteria that feed on that sugar are what create the acids that then wear down the enamel.
Right. That's like the mainstream kind of like narrative today, right?
I mean, I don't know. I like what's the opposing or alternative viewpoint?
I don't
I mean,
know.
I know like yeah, like K2 and all that, but that didn't save me.
I heard, I don't know if it's in Pollock's book about the cells, gels, the engines of life, or another book, but there was, I don't remember it well enough to accurately recite it, but it's something about energy flux. So, like,
Okay.
if the energy, something about the teeth, the metabolism of the teeth themselves,
Yeah.
will sort of push out the, rather than bringing in things that will.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You kind of yeah. Yeah, it's like um kind of like your lymph system almost. Like you want to have like this like constantly moving. When
Mhm,
things stagnate, that's when you get infections.
mhm.
Um yeah. I mean, yeah, that's probably it. I don't know like how to influence that though. 'Cause I have heard that explanation that yeah, you want like whatever it is like in like the root like it's like well like the blood supply basically like you want
Mhm,
but yeah you just want it's like anything else in the body you just want things to be moving
mhm,
flowing and whatnot. When things start to stagnate, that's when problems uh that's when things become a problem. Same thing with digestion. That's like the most obvious example.
mhm. Right. So abiotic oil or.
I don't know, the show's almost over. We can talk about that if you want. I guess yeah, we brought it up, so let's talk about it. um Let me see. I did. Oh, what
I'm
was
just
I looking?
interested. I'm interested in what you are bringing to the table on that. Oh, because yeah, the first thing I'll say about it, which is the thing I was saying before we started recording and then stopped. That is one of the topics that I don't know much about purposefully because I haven't looked into it because I don't want to because um, I guess the best way to explain it is to give other examples, which are vaccines
Yes, I'm the
and
same way about vaccines.
GMOs. That I've spent more time with the GMO thing, but both of them are very political. There's people that
I mean, that's
don't
the
know what they're
problem.
talking about.
Yeah.
That, yeah, that are highly opinionated, and so there's so many things.
They're
Um,
like highly invested groups with a lot of money, so like pretty much all of the research is suspect.
yeah, the research is suspect, and um, it's just that you can't, look into everything. I mean, it becomes like I have definitely gone down some rabbit holes. I mean, m- way more than the average person, and there's you just can't do that for everything. So, like, some people
Yeah.
will think, like, because some people are only presented with a few ideas. Like, there might be somebody on the internet that just got on just got on the internet. I mean, that's crazy to say now, but just imagine like some boomer
Well,
and
I
they're
mean, I
talking
think
about chemtrails or something.
well, I think that that still happens today because like yeah, everyone's on the internet, but what part of the internet are they on? They're basically on like
Yeah,
the CBS, like AOL.com or just on Facebook or whatever. They haven't
right.
they haven't yeah, and so they're still like in a the dark web so to speak or whatever
The
that they haven't
intellectual dark web.
yeah, exactly. I guess we could call it like the gray web because I mean, yeah, I know what you mean because as like a young kid like I was first like I got into like libertarianism and then there were like a few other things, now we're doing, because the libertarians were kind of like the underground politics.
Hmm.
And from there you get into like anarchism and
Hmm.
voluntarism or voluntarism or whatever. And so you get into like this underground political scene. And
Hmm.
then I got into like other like underground scenes and whatnot. And I would always in my head, like I just coined this term like matrix jumping. Because each one of these like underground scenes is kind of like you like, taking the red pill
Hmm.
and that it kind of like subverts the blue pill like mainstream view of these things.
Hmm.
And that's kind of and that's like where we are in the nutrition element. But I
Hmm.
mean, yeah, there are many different matrices to free ourselves from.
Yeah, and all of those things, they're sometimes I'm skeptical of getting involved in them because I think a lot of people that are involved in them are it's like a hobby or a compulsion that is not like geared towards all those things, all those areas. They have a weird internal logic. Like if you were to get on a vegan diet
Yeah.
forum, there are certain things that are just going to be there in the social ether because of some unifying psychological phenomenon that has to do with that topic and how the people it attracts, what it makes those people think also. Uh, and so yeah, there's all these little alternate universes. Um, and I don't want to spread myself too thin, but uh, anyway, all that just to say that I'm actually interested in what you're bringing to the table here in abiotic oil.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I kind of uh put it into a concise bucket by calling it like unconventional arguments against like the mainstream climate change political opinion.
Okay.
Because like yeah, people will, they go back and forth about all kinds of stuff. And to me that's like not important because the clincher, like what sells it all for me, like how I know like why I don't buy the mainstream stuff is because of volcanoes and the solar coronas and stuff like that, like solar activity, which influence the volcanoes. And then actually I found out the other day that the magnetic field also influences these things, and we're supposed to have like a pole reversal, and then like the
Yeah.
next 100 years or something like that. And I can't remember if the magnetic field is what did this, but basically there's like ozone holes over like Greenland and Antarctica. And so the sun is getting in through those holes a lot stronger, and that explains like why those places are melting. And the sea level can be rising because volcanoes are uh, you know, doing their thing into the ocean, raising
Hmm.
the ocean's temperature. I think that the world is going to get colder. I think, and I am perfectly fine with that. I think that's actually better. It's better than the Earth getting cold or warmer because, um, like you won't. Basically, it'll be like, you'll be living, or basically you will have like Minnesota weather in Texas, but Minnesota won't be like any worse.
Okay.
Minnesota will basically just be like Minnesota, but more places will be colder basically.
Hmm.
Um, so I think like if you're thinking like long-term strategy wise, you want to like like if you're like thinking about settling down somewhere, you want to settle down somewhere that is already cold because that's basically the environment you're going to be dealing with. And so it'll basically be like the same thing for you. It won't be as difficult for you to adapt. Whereas like, you'll see these like when like I remember like Atlanta a few years ago or something like that, or like some probably like Alabama, like somewhere down south, like they almost never get like any snow. So when they get like an inch of snow, it just like shuts the city down, even though
Hmm.
that's like nothing in a place that regularly gets snow.
Right.
So that's kind of my logic there. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
um,
Regarding that, but yeah, so that's why I have ignored it. Like again, like we're trying to just like simplifying the things we have to focus on, like what you were just talking about. Like I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Well, I
right.
don't want to go down the climate change rabbit hole, and this is kind of like a way of like me um justifying it to myself. Like I have these
I.
reasons that I find are very
Mhm.
believable, so I don't want to buy that.
The climate change thing is actually something that I fully went down a few years, like starting in 2015. I was reading primary literature, and I could actually probably make a series of videos um, from several different angles. I mean, it is just shout out to Alex Epstein's podcast. I think it's called Power Hour. So it's about
Oh
like
yeah, I think I
energy.
remember. Yeah, you remember telling me about this.
Yeah, I think he just fired it up again. He did it until like 2017 or 2018, and then he didn't. And I was losing interest in that time too, so it was
I
kind of
mean,
good.
I think it was kind of like in the ether, like the zeitgeist of like it was this the topic in general, overall, everywhere was kind of like losing steam.
Yeah, he did this thing where well, he made some sort of institute or something. I don't know what
Oh
exactly the
yeah,
deal was, but he was able to bring on uh all of the like climate heretics, like the scientists that were from various, everything from kicked out of academia to just unpopular in their departments
yeah.
because they were against the mainstream narrative. He was able to bring all of them on to his podcast and all of that, and uh, produced very high quality explanations. And then I was able to take, because a lot of them had published things, and I was able to go and read those and just extremely thoroughly investigate that whole situation. But the thing with the abiotic oil, because I do, I want to talk about that specifically because it gets to a type of a perspectival uh, type,
Perspectival.
perspectival,
Oh,
uh,
what?
it like a
A
perspectival
perspective type.
consciousness.
I guess yeah.
Yes, a type of
Perspective
perspective.
type. Yeah.
Uh, and I find a lot of people, when I first heard about abiotic oil, it was kind of just a retort to peak oil. And so the
Yes,
idea
and
is if, right,
that's been interesting to me because I was in the peak oil scene, and I'll talk about that. But go ahead.
right. So from what I understand, clearly some uh, hydrocarbon fuel sources in the ground are from decayed organic material. I think there's I think coal in
Yeah, I
certain
think yeah.
places. is very linked to a certain times of tree. There's like a mass. I think it was actually because there was too little CO2 and there was a mass die off of large trees that had grown too big to sustain themselves at some point in history. A little fuzzy on that one. And then those got, buried under
Yeah.
layers.
Before we get any farther, you should
Mhm.
explain what abiotic oil is.
Oh, the idea that oil specifically, and perhaps other petrochemicals or high energy density hydrocarbons that humans have been extracting for energy, comes from not just or even not primarily decaying organic matter, but a kind of sort of like there's processes that are happening in the core of the earth all the time that have nothing to do with life, but are just because of gravity and heat and the metals that are there moving around, some molten and some more solid and whatever reason. And that this churns things up and uh, melts down and pressurizes and creates things like oil that is then from this high temperature, high heat process, forced up, similar to something like magma in a volcano, but instead of just liquid rock, it's hydrocarbons that are produced in this process that has nothing to do with biological life. It's organic in that it's like carbon based chemistry, but it's not from living things. It's organic chemistry like what you do in a lab when you just mix together carbon based chemicals but there's no cells, there's
Yeah.
no
Well, there's
enzymes.
there's no biology
Right.
involved, hence the
Yes.
abiotic.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think actually because this came on my radar recently. Like you told me about it a couple of years ago when we were recording before. Um, and so you first introduced me to the idea, but it came on my radar a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember how, but basically they said like they have found like oil. They've gone back to like old, wells or spots or whatnot, and they find oil there again when it's
Hmm.
basically being tapped out.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so did you have anything more to say about abiotic oil, or you want me to go again, or yeah, finish up with my?
Well, I don't have any the thing. So when I said didn't and likely won't deep dive into that, like I don't really want to do the kind of like armchair geology. Like I did, like when I talked about the climate change thing, I did like the armchair physics, and I do spectral biochemistry now, so I understand like absorbance, re-radiation and things like that, uh, and how CO2 is not actually even that big of a deal.
Yeah,
Um,
that was a major thing. Is that I think
mhm.
CO2 is a non-issue.
Yeah, it's only an issue when you create, and this is another of, I think, one or two of the guests from that Alex Epstein podcast. One of them specifically, I think he was a chemist by training and he analyzed the different climate prediction models and he made some of his own. And he was able to prove unequivocally that they're nothing more than extremely convoluted straight line generators. So no matter what you put into them, all of the published
Mm.
models that predict this, because they take the CO2 stuff and then they have to add in mostly water vapor changes that would come from the small change from CO2, and then other things like methane. And then they kind of have this escape velocity where if there's enough of these things together, it hits the water vapor, because that's the big one, is if you can really change the water vapor dynamics, then you can get some climate change. And that's where they can get big numbers. And so all of those models have no justification for how they deal with their variables, and there's nothing, and also they can't predict the current temperature or past temperatures. So like if you take the same models and put all the relevant data of the past, it will give you a higher temperature than it was. So they're just really convoluted algorithms that hide the fact that they are this, that they are just algorithms that you put in real world data points and they give you a higher temperature than is real. or could be real. Um, so anyway, the thing with the abiotic oil that I find interesting is there's a kind of spiritual battle. So peak oil to me, just like climate change, is an a millennialist, like Armageddon end times.
Is it? I think like most of the people that I've seen like do peak oil stuff are like Gen X or like
No,
even Boomer.
I don't mean millennial
Oh,
like I mean
oh,
like
like
early
end of times,
Christians,
end of
like
times type stuff.
millennialist. Yes.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's related to there's something about humans, maybe post-Christianity humans, that feel,
This this need for an apocalypse or
yeah, it's
a
deep.
yeah.
It's deep inside of us. And so so anyway, like certain facts will be necessarily filtered through this like post-Christian, post-millennialist like lens, even in atheists, you know.
Yeah.
So because the climate change and peak oil and peak many resources have embarrassed themselves in terms of predictive power for the entire 20th century.
Yeah. Yeah,
And as far as we
that's the
are,
thing about science is that your theories should be able to predict things, and if they
right,
can't, then they're useless.
especially if the entire point of the field is to be predictive. I mean, if you were just saying this is a descriptive field that has
Yeah,
no prescriptive ability at all,
which is kind of like what like evolutionary biology would be, because like we can't really there's no like predictive power in that. Certainly not with like the mainstream application of it where these
right,
kinds of things require millions of years. Nobody's going to be able to
right.
witness that. So that's entirely descriptive.
Yeah, yeah. It's certainly, I mean, if there's a spectrum, that's like on one side, and something like climate change is billing itself as
Hmm.
preeminently prescriptive, and of course, extremely politically relevant, which is probably the only thing that matters. But anyway, the abiotic oil counterpoint in this little dialectic is it's like a there's something almost religious to part of it to me in the sense that it conjures up this idea that the earth was created for us in a way that is usable for us sustainably. Like if you have a purely materialist perspective on human like existence and reality, you might be comfortable with the idea that, oh, you know what, tomorrow um, a a star event, like a neutron star event that created something a million years ago, could finally reach our solar system, and we would all be be unmade
Yeah.
without even being able to detect it coming.
Yeah.
Like, and that's like a that's on the table for you. Whereas if somebody is like, believes in Christianity or most religions, they have the idea probably not articulated in their minds, but a sort of quasi idea that the earth is at least made purposefully habitable in the long term for us. Um, and so it's like the millennialist thing, like this world that was made for us, that's so great, this is going to be ended. And the no, 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 it's made for us, and like it's going to keep churning up this oil. It's gonna the harvest will come every year. The spring comes after the winter, like it just forever. It's like two sides of the same coin of this certain perspective on the earth as like a mother, and as opposed to the really like hard kind of science fictiony.
Yeah,
um,
where we're going to like go off into the stars.
Yeah, or like this Neil deGrasse Tyson thing, like, oh, we're all just stardust
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and nothing like there. This is an accident that has
Yeah.
no. it could end at any time. Is it even really happening?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
it's like layers of nothingness, and then it's but
Yeah.
they can interpret the same facts. They can interpret the same chart of, like, say, oil discoveries, proven reserves and their fluctuation over the decades, or global mean temperature, or astrophysics, or whatever it is, that we could pretty much say is a fact, as far as that goes. And you could come to wildly different conclusions. And so to me, it's almost like, what is the nature of the world? And it gets to nutrition as well, because it is nutrition, like, was the proper nutrition made for humans to develop with it, or did humans develop with what was here, thus making what was here the proper nutrition? And to what level does manipulating that, like, some people think processing food, which is a loaded term that can mean,
Oh yeah.
you know is bad per se.
Yeah.
um so anyway, that's my, like, totally off off planet
Off the reservation.
perspective on abiotic oil as a philosophical, like a meta philosophical,
Yeah.
heterodox scientific theory.
Yeah. And I mean, like said before, I was like hugely into the peak oil scene. Not like I did like a lot of like first order research or anything like that, but I was like following a lot of material about it, and it was important to me, um, I think emotionally, because it gave me an escape. Like either you could, it's like an escape like valve for like pressure, or just having like an out, like a mental out for something. Um, because I was just so black pilled on so many things. And so I was like, this is it. Peak oil is going to do it. It's going to fix everything. And so I was emotionally invested in it. And so when you actually came up with the abiotic oil, you know, I had to like process that, um, and sort of like come to terms with that. And like luckily I'm in a place in my life where I like no longer need peak oil to happen to like to feel happy about the world.
Uh-huh.
um uh but yeah, I mean, so that's what I have to say about that. That yeah, I think it is there's a lot to say about it, like from a philosophical, or psychological, emotional perspective. There's a lot bound up in all of this.
Hmm.
Because also, too, like when you were talking about like, this earth was made for us, it's perfect for us, and we messed it up. It's because, and so this like kind of like this suggests like our propensity for always like finding an original sin.
Hmm.
This is our original sin is like industrial civilization. Basically, this is like a huge thing in like the paleo nutrition
Hmm.
uh ideology, is that once we started, well, the original sin was actually um farming and agriculture,
Hmm.
according to the paleo ideology.
Hmm.
And yeah, like many other people will agree that also industrial, the same thing with like, with like electricity or just like toxins and whatnot. All this industrial environment that we've created is just like our original sin, and so now we're suffering because of it. And we are almost like using nutrition and our different devices that we find and like modalities to heal ourselves. We are cleansing ourselves of the original sin, because now we live our pure, healthier lives. We've cleansed ourselves. Um, and so now we're not like all of the sickened masses that kind of just came out of nowhere. I didn't really plan to say that. Um,
Yeah, I do think, I mean, there is the Ted Kaczynski kind of the Industrial
Yeah, which is
Revolution
one of
has
my favorite
been.
books actually.
Yeah.
I like people are scared of it because he's the Unabomber and he's crazy and stuff like that. But seriously, like if you are in any way like curious about what we're talking about today and what we'll be talking about, I'm sure on the rest of our shows, like you should definitely read his book. He has a lot of interesting things to say. Like he has like this like power process which was really powerful, like explanatory for me. Again, like with like you have like a model, can it explain things for you? If so, then it's a useful model. And the I think it's the power process that he has in there. It was like it was very helpful for me in like understanding a lot of things about my world. And you can find like you can buy it like in paperback form, but you can definitely find it also as like a PDF.
Yeah, it was an OG manifesto, if you will.
For sure. Well, I mean, like, yeah, not to go into conspiracy land, but like a lot of the newer ones are pretty sus.
Yeah, I mean they s- I don't I mean I've never been in the headspace of a shooter, a mass shooter, so I don't know uh if if that headspace comes along with it, like, all right, I need to do a third edit on my manifesto before I do this killing because this thing has to be ready for prime time. I really don't know, but yes, it's, I guess if even just calling them manifestos, that becomes a meme in the public consciousness. Like, that's
It
bad
is.
now.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Like,
And I mean,
oh, Karl Marx
and
had a manifesto.
exactly. Yeah, because this all started with yeah, the Communist Manifesto,
Hmm.
which is kind of a dirty word in the American mind.
Hmm. Yeah.
um, because we kind of have like our like our Cold War baggage, I guess you could say, where you just like call someone a commie, and now we mostly do it ironically, like as a joke. But that's still there, where yeah, like Communist Manifesto is kind of a dirty word, and so yeah, like any manifesto is a dirty word now.
Yeah, I mean, if you called, like, the um the Mueller report a manifesto, like
Yeah,
there's certain pieces of there's certain monographs of literary production of words that could be described as a manifesto just as much as the journalings of a shooter or the Communist Manifesto, but are not called that in the mainstream media because
yeah,
of the flavor or whatever that they don't they want that to be called a report, or I can't think off the top of my head, but there's probably a dozen euphemisms for, you know, descriptive nonfiction works of technical,
yeah. Yeah,
whatever.
you're doing great at this actually. Your different ways of describing this, like you monograph, which is great. Like I was like, man, I like barely hear that word. Report, yeah, it's easy, simple. I mean, like
Yes.
essay. Essay is probably the most common way to refer to these types of things.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And a manifesto is almost, it's like, it's like essay, and then under that manifesto, and then like
it's a
definition
it
bad essay.
yeah, it's a subtype of
Evil
essay. Yeah,
essay.
like long, unhinged rant form of essay. Basically,
Yeah,
that's what manifesto falls under.
right, right.
But anyways, to I want to wrap this up because we're getting a little long in the tooth. But yeah, so back to the my kind of like unconventional uh reasons about climate change, like why not to buy it. And again, like I do think it's like mostly like a control game. Um because a lot of the solutions that are promoted don't really actually help us in any way. And like I said,
Hmm.
I do believe like CO2 is a non-issue. Like I usually like when people if anyone ever accused me of saying that like I don't care for the environment, I would just tell them that like I'm more of a converse or a conservationist as opposed to like an eco-fascist or an environmentalist. I guess that was the word I was looking for, environmentalist.
Hmm.
I would just because environmentalist has its own baggage, it's more
Hmm.
modern. I would call myself a conservationist because yeah, I like absolutely believe that like we shouldn't be polluting stuff. You know, we should and that kind of thing. CO2 is a non-issue, like for what you talked about. But then also, I came across this in a very, very interesting and I believe important, critical interview, or at least the topic is such on Extreme Health Radio, and it was this guy Artur Rakimov. He is a practitioner of the Buteyko method,
Hmm.
and a lot of people will be familiar with that. But he threw out this interesting fact that, like, during the development of, like, I guess you could say, like, organisms,
Hmm.
probably like the types of like cellular respiration that we use today. And
Hmm.
I've been trying to like dig into this stuff, but it's really hard, especially for someone that doesn't really have like a scientific background like I would talk. Like that's why I want to go back to university, is to get my scientific background.
Hmm.
Like I know a lot from just like reading a lot of like research papers, but there's still like a lot of like kind of like basic science stuff that I'm kind of loose on, and I would just like to fill that out. Um, but yeah, he said like the CO2 was much higher
Hmm.
in the environment, and I actually looked this up on Wikipedia. Um, I found, I think it was like during the Cambrian era, the CO2 was 16 times higher than it is today in the environment. And so that's important because, like we know, with like the Bohr effect,
Hmm.
CO2 is really important for releasing that oxygen and making it usable to the cells in your body. So at one time, something like hyperventilation would have been advantageous, but now it's not.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and then of course there's like always like plants use CO2. So why is it bad? There's, I mean, I think there are probably studies saying that, showing that like plant growth has been like accelerating over the past several years.
Yes. Yes. Yeah,
Um,
that's not even controversial.
yeah, but nobody really, like, it's kind of like it's a fact, but people just ignore it. Like wait,
It
no,
doesn't fit into the world
aren't you
being
exactly?
literally
Aren't
on
you?
fire.
Yeah, aren't you like a tree hugger, and you like have like Arbor Day and stuff like that, which I'm totally about. Like I love trees and plants and stuff like that. Like I can't wait until I buy, I get like my own land somewhere and I get to
Hmm.
like plant trees and stuff like that. I can't wait. But I'm just, yeah, again, like I'm kind of against this from more of like a control structure. This is like somebody trying to control me, and I don't like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, just with the word conservationist, I like that too because it harkens back to
well, it was Roosevelt's thing, Teddy Roosevelt.
yeah, and the interwar period in America. I just started looking into this very interesting stuff from, after World War II, or I'm sorry, after World War I and before World War II, like
Yes.
what was Lindbergh, Charles Lindbergh,
Oh
and
yeah.
his
Yeah.
platform, The Original America First.
Oh,
Uh, it was a conservationist. It was like eugenicist, and not in the sense of like killing people, but just that people were like,
probably what you mean
let's,
is like pro eugenics as
yeah,
opposed to like
pro eugenics in the sense
negative
of,
eugenics. Yeah.
yeah, in the
Well,
sense
it's
of let's make social policy that increases the reproduction of productive, intelligent people.
yeah,
Whatever. That word has a lot of baggage. I'm not
yeah.
even sure we can use it.
Yeah,
Like
it is.
it's
Yeah, but I think as long as you can kind of like make the distinction, you can kind of like make it somewhat defendable. Like a negative
yeah,
eugenicist is like we need to eliminate the bad people.
right,
A
right.
positive, or like, yeah, positive eugenicist is someone that just says like we need to basically like um promote the reproduction of like the highest achieving people in our
Yeah, like you
society.
don't want, yeah, that you don't want, like for example, if somebody has a legitimate genetic disease that is not resolvable with any kind of medical technology and will cause them and their offspring great discomfort, and another person doesn't have that, we, you know, without being brutal and like forcibly sterilizing the person with the
Yeah,
disease, we do ultimately, I think everybody understands that they want a world where children can be born without like crippling genetic conditions
yeah,
or even non-crippling, but just, it's just, and that it kind of gets back to conservation, that there is a natural world. Because the word natural is tricky,
yeah. Fraught
but
with so much.
yeah, but the idea that there's things that it's just probably a good idea to conserve some things. Like, for example, instead of making a park, just leave a plot of
Yeah,
woods or whatever.
yeah. I don't. Yeah, when I say I'm conservationist, I don't mean like I'm like buying all of like Teddy Roosevelt's.
Hmm.
Like I'm down for like the. I think that like national parks are a great thing or whatever. Because I think part of the thing too is like when you just like leave nature to be, I don't think that's responsible either. I think humans have a role. We're kind of like the stewards of the earth,
Hmm.
and so we can make things better. And yeah, part of that too is also like not just like walling off nature.
Hmm.
Um, like there of course needs to be like animals and stuff like that. Like yeah,
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I like that term, and I like the idea because yeah, getting away from the pure like libertarian versus like whatever you would call it, like where everything has to be privately owned and monetized versus things should be state owned. It's the idea like actually we don't have to be completely consistent and have everything one way or everything another. We can choose, like
yeah,
people can choose to do certain things with certain environments and use these different words to describe these things, and it doesn't getting away from that politically tinged language where if you these days you can't call yourself an environmentalist and like be skeptical of climate change, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. I mean, it's a label, and then yeah, you're almost it's limiting, like doing all this labeling and whatnot.
Hmm.
And actually, yeah, one of a quote I came across probably like almost 10 years ago, and that I've only maybe in the past few years have like really start to applied to my own life. It's one of my favorite quotes. Consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. Like
Wasn't
you
that
can't you can't.
is that Emerson or Thoreau? I thought it was one of those two.
Yeah, I don't know. One
Because
of
I've
those two.
I've I've heard that as well.
Yeah, it's just like one of those quotes that yeah, because I mean I don't know, it seems kind of dumb at first because you're like well why wouldn't you want to be consistent like that's like that if you are like inconsistent in your position or something like that, well then like that kind of like weakens your position. But I think
Hmm.
it just allows you the flexibility to kind of approach things um on your own terms and yeah, just exercise your own judgment because then you can become beholden by this label or this ideology that you've kind of like taken upon yourself, even if it's self-created.
Hmm.
You can become beholden to that. And yeah, I mean there are other aspects to why I think like not limiting yourself to consistency is a good thing, but at least like in the terms of like philosophical ideas, that's what I have to say about it. And then unless you have any more to say, I got to get to my final point, which is what started the whole like why I came up with this topic, why I wanted to
Hmm.
talk about it, which is I was thinking about like I was like, okay, well if like CO2 emissions don't matter, then like what's more polluting? An electric car or a gas car? And how would we measure that? So we'd
Hmm.
probably measure that by like, different kind of like particulates and heavy metals probably.
Elon Musk would like to know your location.
I actually I will probably never own a Tesla, but I really enjoy the fact that the Tesla company exists. Because I think they are like innovating in a lot of good ways, just because they're coming at it from a completely different perspective, and they're not just like a car company making cars. Like
Hmm.
they really are like kind of like trying to do something different, and I really enjoy that. Um, but anyways, um, like there's a lot of like possibilities that having an electric car open you up to, and those wouldn't happen, you know, from GM or
Hmm.
like even like BMW. I don't think, or like Mercedes. I don't
Hmm.
think even those, or like a Toyota or something like that. I don't think even they would like be as creative and exploratory as like Tesla has been in their application of like using making electric vehicles.
Hmm.
But anyways, so yeah, and I was trying to find data on like the emissions of heavy metals, like because like most coal or most power, like electrical power in the United States comes from coal.
Hmm.
And it's well established that like yeah, that like emits a lot of like heavy metals. Like mercury is a huge one, just because it's like so just like a small amount can be like hugely destructive. um and so I was trying to find data where you could kind of like compare these apples to apples, and it doesn't really exist. And that's kind of like the other problem too with like electric cars is people don't actually understand. Like it's a lot harder. I mean, they do from like an intellectual level. They understand like the pollution. They like their electricity is coming from a power
Hmm.
plant that's like coal and whatnot, and they're like mining like rare earths metals and stuff like that for all these batteries, and they're, I'm sure they're like extremely difficult to recycle. And but I mean like regular cars are also difficult to recycle too. Um uh but because of that removal, it's difficult for us to like really like viscerally understand the kind of pollution that we are making when you have like an electric car versus having a regular internal combustion
Hmm.
vehicle where you smell the emissions and everything. You know it's there. It's not. So I was just trying to think like, well, if you like compared like how much heavy metals are going into the environment per kilowatt hour, like of power, like per power produced, like unit of power produced, when you compare like gas or oil versus coal. And the reason why the abiotic oil became a topic is because, well, then we don't have to worry, because we can just keep using oil because it's going to keep being produced, right?
Hmm.
Whereas like coal is probably not going to be produced. But
That's true.
it
Uh,
was just a thought experiment
yeah. Yeah. I
because there,
think.
there there is no data on it. Like I looked, I spent like 2 or 3 hours last night trying to find data on it, and I did, find some interesting things, but nothing came
Did
up
you
that
look?
really kind of
Did you
like
look for
settled.
an article of somebody that like hates Tesla? Because there are some people like that that will do this.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, like I said off air or like after the episode last time, like there is one nutritional researcher, and basically like I want to prove him wrong, and so I'm like emotionally invested in creating an argument
Yeah.
against his thing. And this is not a bad thing, because this is how this I mean this is how like someone can create a good argument. You just have to like just the argument itself has to be worthwhile.
Hmm.
Obviously you want to avoid all of the classic no-nos, like ad hominem and and
Hmm.
logical fallacies and stuff like that. You don't want
Hmm.
that kind of emotional investment where you're trying to win at like any cost, but you do want someone who is like, I believe in this, so I'm going to find a way to make this a reality. And I mean that's
Hmm.
what a lot of like great science, like those like scientific pioneers were like. I mean that's why they would do experiments on themselves, is
Hmm.
because they believed in something. They were emotionally invested in their experiment.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. I was just. I've read some articles that like went after the financial stuff between like Elon Musk's companies and stuff, and the people that wrote that, it was clear that there's an aspect of, and I'm actually agnostic on the whole thing. Like I don't really care. I don't. if Tesla disappeared tomorrow, that's a bummer. If it takes over the automobile industry, that's kind of also a bummer. And like I don't know, I don't care, but there's people that really do care, and a lot of people are offended at like some of the subsidies, and then there's enormous debates over the extent of the subsidies, which is a big turnoff. But anyway, these people will dig up like corporate governance malfeasance between like say SpaceX and like Solar
Oh,
City
yeah,
and
like
stuff like that. So there are
they're
people
being
doing that work.
incestuous and whatnot.
Yeah, like if one company, say SpaceX, gets paid to make rockets from Congress and then loans money to Solar City,
Yeah.
like, and then that company or say whatever, that there's, if you really wanted to, there's certain ways in which maybe you could even make the argument that it's like illegal, but it's so obviously it's, before somebody like Elon Musk would do that, he would have a bunch of high powered lawyers look at it. So it's not like you could actually get him for it, but it's just like maybe
Yeah.
the intent of Congress giving, a contract and paying up front to SpaceX was definitely not,
Yeah.
to
Well,
underwrite a
I mean,
loan
it's
to
kind of
some other
interesting.
company.
And because yeah, like all of his three companies, I think he maybe has like a fourth as well. They're kind of like synergistic.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the solar panel one obviously relates, like to electrical
Yeah.
technology. It relates to Tesla, and then the the rocket ship is that way he can create a electrically powered, battery powered rocket and fly that into space to Mars, where there's no oil, and he can just live off sun power there.
Is that the end game?
Yes, that's the synergy that's happening between all of those.
But anyway, I would think that there'd be like some type of um, at least moderately scientifically literate journalist that has a chip on his shoulder about Elon Musk, that has probably not done all of the work that you want, but has at least started the process of saying, "Hey guys, actually, actually,
Actually,
there, emissions, a tank of gas, whatever you want to call it, a mileage of electric cars. Here's some numbers about emissions, and then there's the stuff about, yes, some of those places in China where the rare earth metals are like wastelands and like post-apocalyptic, like
yeah.
Fallout 4.
Yeah, I think it's a big thing in Africa as well. I think it's actually where a lot of it is happening because Africa is actually they have the best resources as far as that's concerned. But I mean, that's why China's colonizing Africa,
Right.
and why we end up going to war to, or not, excuse me. I'm sorry. We are sending in troops to deal with Ebola and
Yeah.
whatnot periodically, different kinds of reasons to go there.
Yeah, there's a lot of good humanitarian reasons to have boots on the ground there. So I
Yeah.
think it's great.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it.
All right, cool.